All right, Dad. Good morning. Today is September 11th, of Wednesday. And in our last podcast, you told us a convincing story that a rumor, I guess we should say, that the between the U.S. military and the Russian military that they're working out some kind of deal that okay, we won't give Ukraine long-range missile capabilities to launch deep into Russia, and then Russia won't give ship-killing missiles to the Houthis or to some other
Yeah, that
third
was
party.
yeah. The latter part is pure speculation.
Yeah,
I mean,
speculate.
just
That's
that
it, as an
that
example.
there may be some deal or may have been some deal where, it's speculation.
Right, and it made a lot of sense. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then we also said that if if Ukraine did have these long range missiles, that could be a big escalation that can lead towards an all out war and eventually to a nuclear war. And so we're like, okay, it sounds like cooler has prevailed, and the Pentagon has maybe reached a deal with the Russian military and said we're not going to do this. And then literally within 24 hours after we had that podcast, I see a headline that says the U.S. will grant Kiev long-range missile capabilities to strike deep into Russia. So,
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, see, I was struck by how firm actually the administration, or I guess it's now in retrospect, it's clear that it was really um, the Defense Department and probably the intelligence agencies too. They had been holding the line. You know, the Kiev regime had an all out PR offensive to convince the U.S. administration to allow them to use these missiles. Of course, they already have ATACMS, but they're not allowed to use them to strike into pre 2014 Russian territory. Um, so they had actually gone. I think it was Yermak and some other high-ranking official from Kiev actually went to the Washington D.C. and tried to persuade them. And again, it was no. The answer was no, no, no. And then there was that conference in Ramstein in Germany. The NATO conference. And again, there the Kiev's people went all out and pushing for this, and Zelensky himself has been making the argument again and again. But again, the answer was no, 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 and directly from the mouth of Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense. We can't do that. And so it looked to me, and I think it still may be true, that they actually have some kind of deal with the U.S. And anyway, it shows that there is an awareness that there are some firm, real red lines. A lot of these red lines people talk about are actually not red lines that the Russians have declared, but I think this one is. I mean, this clearly is. This would be because of the technology involved and the need for NATO participation in operating these missiles. Attacks into Russian territory would be, in fact, attacks by NATO, or NATO involvement. And that's a very, very serious matter. That clearly is a red line. But then, as you pointed out, it looked like they're really holding the line, that they were respecting taking the Russian warning seriously. And then we get this news that Blinken and someone else, who is he? I think maybe he's going actually with the British foreign minister. That's right.
yeah, to
Right.
Kiev. Yeah.
To Kiev, and that they're going to propose to allow this to allow Kiev to use these long range missiles for strikes into Russia. Um, so I think, well, first of all, I mean, it shows a rather incoherent and chaotic administration on such an important issue. You've been speaking with a clear voice, and then it's like, oh no, we've changed our mind. What is this again? It's just not very serious. It gives you a sense that there's really nobody in charge. And I think probably all along, this is something we pointed out earlier. Actually, the more reckless and hawkish elements tend to be found in the State Department. And this has often been true in the U.S. and I think in other countries as well. So often the military departments are in fact more conservative because they understand the issues, I think, much more clearly. And then Tony Blinken, he just wouldn't take no for an answer. So he's pushing for it, and we'll see. I mean, that's Yeah, that's scary. That would be a major escalation, and I think is something that most definitely will invite a serious, a very significant response by the Russians if indeed they carry these out.
Who do you think made the call to allow this?
Who knows? Maybe it was just Tony Blinken himself. Like Joe Biden's barely there, or maybe
Do you think I was
he
about to say? Do you think Biden could have? Because obviously
could have.
Biden wants
Right.
this war
I
to
mean,
keep
he
going.
he is
So
a real, anti-Russia hawk. And it could have been like they found him. They found him first of all, like able to track him down
physically find
and
him,
yeah, and able to talk to him. He was conscious, and they got what they wanted out of him. That's certainly possible.
right? I mean, he's technically commander in chief. So what is the argument that Zelensky in Ukraine is making to get these weapons? What do they hope to achieve with these longer missiles? I mean,
Right.
Zelensky, I guess, is trying to achieve NATO involvement, so to drag NATO into
Yeah.
the war, I
Well,
guess.
you hear different arguments from them about these, the use of long range missiles, and one is like just to take the war to the civilians.
Is that an actual argument made?
Yeah. Okay. It's something that he makes again and again. I don't know if he's actually made it in the context of this specific request. Maybe not. But just knowing him, he will make it. I mean, it's just something that it seems to be something. I don't know if they really believe in it,
I'm
but
talking
it's
about
to,
Zelensky.
yeah, because I don't think that. Okay, maybe I should have set that aside. Okay, a lot of what they've done, including the Kursk offensive, has been justified in those terms, and that's actually an argument for terrorism, as others pointed out. In this case, I think it's just simply to be able to, yeah, I mean to uh, inflict serious harm, on Russian facilities. It's not quite clear. First of all, as Lloyd Austin pointed out, that the Russians, in anticipation of this possibility, have moved a lot of their assets beyond range of these missiles, the missiles that we're talking about giving them. Or again, we've already given the ATACMS, and we just haven't authorized their use within pre 2014 Russia. But yeah, they'll be out of range. So it's not even like Lloyd Austin was saying. It's not clear what they can do with them, but they claim that they can do something. They can hit Russian military assets or maybe troop concentrations and somehow equalize the battlefield. It really is an argument that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But most of the arguments that you get, from Zelensky and the Kiev leadership really don't make much sense. They're losing the war, and these things they're not going to have an effect on the outcome of the war. They're just going to potentially, especially if they hit a civilian target, it could create a real crisis and invite a very severe Russian response. And maybe that's what they want to do, even though they're not going to be saying that openly. And then, it could do damage to an air base or to a troop concentration, but it won't it'll just be a fraction of what Russia is able to do against Ukraine day in and day out. So it's just again, how is it going to change the balance of the war? It just doesn't even come close.
Well, it definitely could change the balance of the war because we were just saying in the last episode how this event could really cause things to escalate, spill into an all-out war, and I guess maybe that's the
Right.
calculation
Well, I
that
think that's
Zelensky's
probably
taking.
if there's a logic here, and I guess there is. That's it. It's just that they will do something to invite a very strong Russian response that could be used to as justification for direct involvement of NATO forces in Ukraine.
Right.
And I
So
think
what
I
kind
think
of
that's probably the thinking there.
right? So that I think that's got to be the plan. So let's just pretend that you're Zelensky. What would you do? Because it's a fine line. If you blow up, a school in the middle of the day, that's too much, right? That's not going to
Yeah.
that'll get international condemnation, and it's
It
just going to make
might. You
Ukraine
never
look
know.
bad.
It'll get some. It's definitely in the global South. I mean, it's just the way the media works in the West. There'll be some claims that this is a Russian false flag, and so on and so forth. They'll do whatever they can to spin it. But yeah, there is a risk. It will certainly get condemnation from much of the world, the true world community.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a Hail Mary play, and I don't think it would work for Zelensky because the Russians, or at least Putin, has shown that he's pretty restrained. Trying to get
Yeah,
him to overreact is difficult.
I think
Um,
it's well nigh impossible. The guy is very, very cool, and
mm,
even frustratingly so for people on the Russian side. A
right.
lot of them
They
are
want
itching
him
to
to do
do
more.
more, but um, yeah, he's very careful about how he proceeds in response to this, and he sticks with his. If he has a winning formula, he sticks with it. He doesn't get sidetracked. So it's just bound to fail. Um, but I guess looking at it, if you refuse to consider real negotiations and territorial concessions. And that's clear that the no one in Kiev now is willing to consider that. Then it's either continuing, okay, this war of attrition that you clearly are losing, and it's just like it's a sure death slowly. Maybe at some point it won't be so slow. It seems to be, again, the speed is picking up, but it's still relatively slow. Um, it's either that or well, or you've got to do something to really just change um, the whole composition, the whole configuration of the war. And that is mainly is to bring in, their thoughts of somehow creating chaos in Russia. That's I think it's very foolish. And every time that's attempted through some attack on Moscow or whatever, it only steals the resolve of the Russians in general and makes them more it actually strengthens again the hands of the nationalists in Russia to respond even more forcefully. It doesn't, and it pressures on Putin to respond more forcefully, but it doesn't in any way destabilize Russia. That's been clear, and it's just obvious that whole approach doesn't work. Well, okay. You want to do something, a false flag, or just something, provoke a response to bring in that's it, because you're losing by yourself. You're losing, so you know that there are some people in NATO. Some of these governments really are willing to take on Russia directly. There are Poles and there are people in the Baltic states that are willing to do that, and then Macron talks like he wants to do that too. So perhaps if that could be you look at it, that's maybe the only way out, right? So you just have to do it. You have to start throwing a lot of Hail Mary passes.
Can the attackums, won't it just be a pass incomplete with these
Yeah.
attackums?
Well,
Right?
first of all,
They're gonna be
they've been largely neutralized. You don't even hear about them. You heard, but the Russians have figured them out. And I think even with an attack, it's like at the farthest range, you maybe can get to just the outskirts of Moscow, but not to Moscow. If you the likelihood that it could actually, well, first of all, it really can't hit Moscow, but that it's going to do any significant damage. Yeah, eventually, if you have enough, you can get something through and do some significant damage that could be enrage the Russians. That's certainly possible. But another thing to remember is that the ATACMS stockpile is limited and dwindling by the day. They don't even make them anymore. It's been out of production for a long time, and my understanding is the Americans gave the Ukrainians really all the ATACMS that they really could afford to hand over. So there's really not a whole lot they can do. They talk about this JSAM, is an
yeah,
air-launched subsonic cruise missile. That
right.
can go a little bit farther, and that could reach Moscow. It doesn't go a whole lot farther than the long-range ATACMS, but it can go like another 50 kilometers, and I think it could actually hit Moscow.
So is the JSAM kind of the ATACMS 2.0? Is it the new upgraded version? Why did they discontinue
No,
the ATACMS?
the ATACMS is a ballistic missile, which is fired using the HIMARS launcher. The JSAMS is a cruise missile, that means it can actually change course. It's like a jet without wings. You can pre-program a course, and then it can also, I think you can make adjustments to the course, or it can make adjustments itself, based on data that it collects during the flight. So it has that advantage. It can actually make a circuitous route around some air defense systems. If they, the Americans very carefully study Russian air defense systems, and they can find maybe some vulnerable points and program a cruise missile to pass through those points. And it also flies low, which makes it harder to detect, but it's slow, and It's subsonic and it's GPS guided. And the Russians have shown that it's actually very easy for them to neutralize GPS guidance systems. So, again, it's probably one of these things that probably, after it's introduced to the Ukrainians, I suppose they would fire from the F-16s because they virtually have no aircraft remaining. They don't have they don't have many F-16s or much of anything right now. But they would have to fire it from what the limited air force that they have. Um, and maybe initially one or two will get through and do some significant damage. But I think if we've seen this happen again and again, the Russians will figure out how to neutralize it. I don't think it will be particularly hard for them.
Is there any weapon that the U.S. could give Ukraine that could really be a potential game changer, as they say? Missiles that could
Um,
or have, because I get this argument a lot. Actually, people say, "Oh, well, we're just giving them our old stuff," and a lot of times when I look at this stuff, it is old, but I don't know what's replaced it. The F-16s. I'm like,
yeah.
wow, these are 30 years old, and the ATACMs. They have, a lot of this stuff is from the 90s or whatever,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm like, well, there's got to be a lot of new, upgraded stuff that maybe we haven't seen yet, but I don't know if there really is. It seems like they
Well,
kind of
okay. Well, we have
refit
given
these
some of our,
things.
yeah, we have given them some of our most advanced stuff. Maybe it's not as far as missile technology goes, but they gave them that. I guess it's the Excalibur artillery shell. That's $100,000 a pop, and that was just a big flop. And actually, like these small diameter guided bombs, those are just recently actually improvised, and those that was supposed to make a big difference. It didn't. A HIMARS, it's not a long range system, but it's part of the main force now. It's new, and they're in production. It's like what they have partly for East Asia too. But again, initially it did make a difference, and now it doesn't because the Russians have neutralized it. Um, I'm sure there are longer range missiles, certainly. Um, and there was the Taurus. There was a lot of news, talk about that. That's the German. That actually goes 500 kilometers. That's truly a long range missile. But it looks like actually Olaf Scholz finally grew a backbone on that one and just says, no, we just can't do that. So there does seem to be some recognition about, how far they can go on missile technology. But let's say even if we gave them our most advanced missiles, the thing is, well, first of all, Russia has an arsenal that no matter what, we can't give them everything because we are supposed to protect our own territory. We sometimes forget about that we have an army that's supposed to be for the defense of the United States. And then Russia just has such an enormous arsenal with such a wide range of missiles already that it's just, you say, it's never going to be equalized. Therefore, it's never going to be a game changer. And then also they have this very well integrated, intact air defense system that Ukraine lacks. They started off with one, but it was the old Soviet system. But the Russians just picked it apart, and then we sent in the replacements like the Patriot system and the Iris-T and whatever, and those have just been largely destroyed. So they have very little. So in the end, it's still not going to be an equal battle, even if you gave them 100. Let's say top of the line, state of the art missiles, because they're going to have hundreds more, and they have better defense against them. So, and by doing that, you also just clearly are making a statement that we're attacking Russia because everybody understands that these missiles have to be programmed, by our technicians. And that's just something, again, it's just clear that the Defense Department does not want to do this. We'll see if maybe we're that crazy. Maybe we are, but
Do you think there's a big disconnect between like the Defense Department and some of these NATO officers that are actually on the ground? Who are they getting the orders from? Because maybe they're at the point where they want the war to go all. Is
yeah.
that possible? So these people that are on the ground that are putting in the GPS coordinates, like how high up does it go for the decision to send an ATACMS or a
Yeah, well,
JSAM
that's got to
missile
be at the
into?
top. I mean, that's really, that's a decision for the commander in chief to make, to actually send a new weapon system. Um,
Well,
Yeah,
they're making the announcement. It's actually should be today, I believe. I think Anthony Blinken is in Kiev today, and the announcement should come today or tomorrow. Maybe after this podcast,
yeah.
we'll find out.
One thing I should just add is that, I mean, he used, yeah, he came up with kind of an excuse for this. I mean, after it came out that they were now reconsidering,
You mean Blinken?
yeah, Blinken did, reconsidering, that they allowing Kiev to use these missiles on Russian territory. Um, he came up with the excuse that, well, the Iranians are supplying missiles to Russia, so therefore, but
I
there's
saw
just
that. Yeah.
there's no, first of all, I don't know that it's true. I don't even know why the Iranians would be supplying missiles to Russia. Russia has such a huge arsenal already, and then clearly, it seems to me that Iran is in need of like every missile that it has because it could find itself in a war with Israel at any moment now. So it just doesn't seem to me likely. But that's the rumor, or those are the reports.
Hmm.
But even if they did, whether they're saying 200 missiles, what does that have to do? It's just like, Russia buys some missiles from an ally. Okay, well, I mean that's what everything. That's what Ukraine does all day long. That's basically Zelensky's seems like sole purpose in life is just to get more missiles. So there's hardly any balance here. That's not the issue. It has nothing to do with that. The issue is that you are, and you rarely see this discussed in the West. They don't talk about it. They just put in terms of, well, it's just fairness. They should be able to fire back, but they don't talk about the fact that these require our participation. They need our technicians, our data, to make them effective. That's
Hmm.
the problem. Everything, this whole,
Right.
Iranian
Iran's not
issues that come.
there on the
Yeah,
ground coordinating and using their GPS to guide Russian missiles into Ukraine or to use their own
right.
missiles. Iranian missiles. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think that is something that is overlooked. I think for the most people that are casual observers of the war, they just assume like, oh well, we just give this stuff to them or sell it to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians just use it how they see fit. It's not our problem. We didn't do it, didn't do anything. But like
Uh,
you said, we have to realize that no, if we are on the ground, giving them, inputting the data, coordinating it, selecting the target, approving it. We might even be pushing the button. Who knows? Or it's such
yeah,
as we have some Ukrainian push it.
yeah,
It's at that point, it's like okay, if you're holding the hand that's holding the gun pointing in, you
yeah,
help pull his finger to pull the trigger.
yeah,
It's you.
yeah,
You're the one doing
right.
it.
Yeah,
Um, okay,
clearly an
well,
accomplice.
so this is a major escalation. Would you say this is
Yeah, well, it
the
hasn't happened yet, but it seems likely, just based on past experience.
right? How
Yeah, it is.
credible?
It is. It certainly is. I mean, again, remember, it wasn't too long ago that we said, okay, we're going to allow just very limited use of certain weapons, not including ATACMS. It's just
Right.
like up to HIMARS. They can fire it into
The Kharkov.
P-2014.
Right.
Yeah, so he's talking about Kharkov in particular. Because they were complaining that okay, they launched this attack and we weren't able to fight back. If we would have been able to hit the like a troop assembly points or the convoys or whatever with your HIMARS, we could have stopped this. And so we said, okay, for defensive purposes within that limited scope, like if they're launching a raid, or an offensive um, from from Kursk or Kharkov or one of these
Right
regions
across the
that border
border.
directly, right? Then to stop it, you can fire directly at military assets on the other side. Now we're going to new weapon systems, and we're expanding the scope. We're saying, yeah, you can just. So it's just these things don't hold. You see why Zelensky just makes a pain of himself, because he finds that if he just he keeps on complaining and griping about the U.S. or NATO not giving him the weapons he wants. He knows that if he keeps on complaining, eventually it will give them to him. He's probably thinking it'll just keep on going all the way up to nuclear weapons or something.
Well, he might be right.
Yeah, he might be right.
It didn't take very long. I feel like for them to crack on the long range
Yeah,
missiles.
right. I mean, I was, again, I guess foolishly optimistic, because they could see the Defense Department, and maybe the Defense Department will still win out, but probably not. Probably I think Tony Blinken has Biden's ear, and what's left of his brain to communicate with.
Okay,
And it's
so then
probably,
let's war game this just a little bit. So, to tell us what you think Zelensky's going to do, and what do you think the Russian response is going to be, if they're given the
yeah,
green light.
yeah. I really don't know. Because, we're saying, just like Lloyd Austin was saying, that it really can't do a whole lot with them. And I don't, I don't see us like allowing him to just strike soft civilian targets. I really don't think we're that crazy.
Yeah, one, Ukraine's been targeting a lot of civilian targets. I mean, the Kursk incursion for
Yeah.
sure, but with the use of U.S. coordination inputs, they haven't been,
No,
right. Those
right.
missiles
What
haven't.
is
It's
so
usually
it's
shelling.
right. Sure. It's generally shelling, and then sometimes it's like those check systems, the vampire
Vampire.
systems, right? And they've done so. They've killed a lot of civilians. Poor Donetsk has been shelled for better than 10 years now, and you would just hope. They're saying it may be like the very last shelling site, like one actually maybe like the main source of shells that directed at Donetsk civilians was in Krasnogorivka, and that battle has finally ended. I mean, it went on forever. I just going back, I think in March or something, and then kept on getting these reports like they've got all like 90% of it, but that last 10% or whatever, the for whatever reason, either the Russians just didn't push very hard, or the Ukrainians just fought tooth and nail to hang on to it. But they've finally been driven out of Krasnogorivka and of the surrounding area. It's actually a very large area. There's a large pocket to the north of Krasnogorivka, and they've simply retreated. But that, what a lot of people were saying, it was maybe the last place from which they could fire artillery shells into the net. So hopefully, it certainly has slowed down. Like after Avdiivka was captured by the Russians, you notice that the shelling of Donetsk city went down, and hopefully it'll just end now. I don't know if they have any. I hope that Donetsk is outside of artillery range. We'll find out. But yeah, that's how they usually, it's artillery shells and then and drones. There was actually a woman killed not too far from Moscow by a drone.
Oh, I saw that. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyways, Zelensky, we don't know exactly what he's going to do, what he's going to target, but obviously he's going to try to target something. Russia is going to have to respond. This is a red line that they really drew in the sand.
Yeah.
There is going to be response.
Right.
Your theory that you put out there, which I think makes sense, is that Russia won't necessarily directly target NATO itself or NATO base within within a NATO country. Most likely they will go through a proxy themselves, and one that you put forward were the Houthis, to give them longer range, which is like, okay, U.S., you are giving Ukraine long range missiles to strike deep into our country now. Okay, Houthis, here are a bunch of missiles.
Right. Right.
Go,
For example,
go to town on the U.S. ships going through the Red Sea, U.S. naval vessels. Attack. Do you think they would turn them on Israel? I mean, obviously,
I don't think I think they would want to have them use it against some American military assets. That would be a true tit for tat. Okay, you did this. You're waging a proxy war against us. We'll wage a proxy war against you, and so that makes some logical sense.
That's scary. If they
is.
do that,
That's why I think they're reluctant to do that. But if the U.S. at some point they have to respond, because like they see this escalation just never stops. Now it's getting into truly dangerous territory. They're gonna at some point, even Putin just has to say, and one thing is we don't forget that we say, okay, Putin's very cool. He just doesn't respond to a lot of these provocations, but he does eventually. And when he does, it's major. And an example, of course, is the SMO, right? They're just say, hey, you are crossing our red lines, and it's just like, they always say they're just bluffing, whatever. He wasn't, and it was huge, right? So, again, I think they make a mistake. He's just saying, okay, he doesn't respond to every instance, every provocation, but after an accumulation of provocations and escalations, he does respond.
Hmm.
And that very well may be how he chooses to respond, through the Houthis.
Right.
That's just a
And
possibility. I mean, there are
yeah.
rumors that that the Russians were considering supplying them with anti-ship missiles. And
So
then,
these anti-ship missiles, if they give them to the Houthis, does it require Russian input, Russian coordination, just like,
I don't
or would
know.
the,
I don't have the answer to that. But if it did, it would just be perfectly, fair. You just say, okay, that's what you're doing over there, and this is what we're doing here, right? So
yeah, but
look, this is a consequence of what you're doing.
what's so scary about the United States, though, is, we love to dish it. We love to dish it out to other
Right.
countries. But as soon as
Right.
somebody stands up and says
Yeah.
anything, then we
It's like,
freak
oh
out.
my God. Yeah,
Right.
right.
Yeah. You dare to push back or whatever, then you know how it's going to be portrayed. There's not going to be any mention about that this is a tit for tat response because of what we're
Yeah.
doing with
Yeah.
Ukraine
Because
over there.
right.
It's just going to be Russia and the Houthis have had attacked America. That's what's going to be the headlines blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
And
sure the Russians understand that, right?
and
I
they're
mean,
going to win out. Those warmongers are going to win out. Because a lot of
yeah.
people aren't watching it like we're watching it, and they'll just see the headlines on Fox News, MSNBC, and they will just get. I have a feeling we'll go all in if that happens, and I don't know. It's
Yeah,
scary.
we'll see. Yeah.
But maybe do you think they're? I mean, we're in just speculation land right now, but
Yeah.
do you think there's a chance that? Okay, let's say they use their ATACMs. They're just completely neutralized. They try to fire them into suburbs outside of Moscow or whatever, and maybe they even get the JSAMs, but none of them really do any damage because they're all neutralized with the
Well, yeah, let's
Russia's
hope
air
so.
defense or the
Right.
electronic warfare. Do you think if that's the case, then Putin would be able to withstand domestic pressure internally to just say, like, we're not
Yeah.
going to
Well, I mean, if it
overreact?
doesn't get through, right, sure. I think he would. So let's hope that that they do succeed in neutralizing, every one of these strikes if they indeed occur.
I wonder the calculation from somebody like Blinken. I understand from Zelensky, this is existential for him. He's got to
Yeah.
do this. This is his only way out. I understand Netanyahu. They're both evil men, but I understand that they are in a fight for their own existence, their political
Yeah.
and physical survival.
Yeah. Right.
But I just don't understand our government, our administration. What's in it for us?
Right.
Why does Blinken want to do? Does he
Yeah,
think this
well-
will prolong the war? Does he want World War III? How much Raytheon and stock does he own? Why? Well, what's the
Yeah,
calculation?
I don't know. I don't. Yeah, I don't. I think maybe he just really doesn't understand the situation very well. Not the way that the military people understand it better, and that's why they're saying no. It's hard to explain. But yeah, it's just again, I guess I could just go back to against it. Just this sense of being the hegemon, and this visceral, irrational hatred of Russia. Just like his irrational Zionism, it ends up blinding you to certain realities, and that's all I can say, because I think a rational actor, certainly like the U.S. during the Cold War would never consider doing anything like this. They would have a few, there would be a few hot-headed hawks, but they would be told to shut up and keep their hands off the policy. I think but we just live in different times. We just have people, again, who are in a way just less serious, they're political animals. They're
idiots. They're idiots.
Yeah. Also obsessed with short term, with image and, that kind of thing. It's just, and the consequences can be horrific. We've seen what's happened in Israel and what's happened in both places.
Let's just say that we do end up in this situation where all of a sudden the Houthis sink a U.S. naval vessel, or one part of our fleet, and what happens then? Do you think what could the U.S. do? Would they try to enact Article 5? And use it to go against the Russians, even though it's the Houthis? I mean,
yeah. Well, yeah,
it would
that's
just
the
be
danger.
a quagmire. It's just a mess.
Right.
Like,
No,
what would
that's
NATO
the
be
danger.
able to do?
Right. Yeah, well, one thing it's just shown that they've been bombing the Houthis for months, and it just obviously hasn't worked. It just, there's really nothing to bomb there. You
Mm,
know, um, yeah, but at the same time, it would be a real serious blow to U.S. prestige, right? And you just have the pressures to do something significant in response would be overwhelming. Um, well, just think about like it wouldn't be quite September 11th. Today is September 11th, right? So if we
mhm.
can, it wouldn't be quite that, but it would be a major blow to U.S. prestige. That would be in some ways similar to what we experienced on September 11th, and there would be calls to retaliate. Now, and then it's like the calls to retaliate in the end had very little to do with the actual threat. It's just there are people out there who have their plans, and they just saw the chance. Okay, yeah, now we get to overthrow Iraq, and overthrow the regime of Saddam Hussein, who had nothing to do with it. That's what we did. So who knows what direction it could take? It's just like,
Right. We could start
uh,
bombing Iran,
yeah,
We know
yeah.
Iran.
Well, that's right, because we would say that the Houthis are, we'll call them proxies of Iran, and then we'll
Mm.
just claim that there was a clear Iranian connection, and we'll start bombing Iran. Yeah, I think
The,
that's a real
yeah, I think it's more
possibility.
likely if this is just how messed up it is. It's more likely, I think, if Russia gives ship killing missiles to the Houthis and the Houthis use them and sink a U.S. ship, then the U.S. will attack Iran. That's just
Yeah.
kind of that's how we do
Well, it's
it.
just like, yeah, right. And we went
Just
in
like
and
with
attacked
Iraq.
Iraq, right?
Right. Right. Okay. Well, that's sobering. Let's
Yeah, well, it hasn't. Nothing's happened yet, but that's the whole thing about Houthis. That's speculation, but there have been reports that the Russians were considering and actually were persuaded not to do it by the Saudis, and I think even the Americans. But if like the Americans really did, there had to be some sort of agreement, I would think, for the Russians to say, okay, oh, we won't do this, but you understand you can't do that. And maybe what Tony Blinken is trying to do right now is going to upset that agreement. So, again, speculation, but it's based on something, based on reports that are really out there.
what do you think our chances are of this exploding into a real World War III possibility? Is it not too far fetched to say that something like this is a real possibility now? I mean,
Well,
especially
yeah, of course. I mean, if NATO becomes directly involved, well, they will be if they, again, if they remove the restrictions on the missiles and supply the JSAM system without the restrictions. Then yeah, we're really on the verge of World War III, because that's NATO fighting Russia, and that's almost sort of a textbook definition of World War III. That's the World War III that we foresaw. It's so it is. It's very, again, there may be some things that'll be. Russia does not want to fight World War III, and I think actually most people in NATO don't want to fight World War III too. I mean, they're behaving very recklessly. Some of them, I think there are a few hotheads, maybe on both sides, that really want to, but I think most don't. So it may be that even if this happens, that something will be worked out to prevent that from taking place. Again, they're obviously very reckless, stupid people, like especially on the NATO side, people like Tony Blinken and Macron. They're not actually stupid, but we'll just say that they're deluded, smart but deluded, and could take us into a war. But hopefully there are enough people that are still aware of reality that will come short of that. Again, I just see less of, I see more reason to worry about things spinning out of control in the Middle East. I mean, there are reasons to be very worried about Ukraine, but I think even more reasons to be worried. Again, just very recently, I think that the news has come down. Like, I think that there was a report that Netanyahu was actually ordered the invasion of southern Lebanon, and that the Americans had told Israel, look, he's saying, we got all our navy, our fleets here, but they can't stay here forever. So if you're going to do something, do it now. That was something that was leaked. Who knows if it's true, but there is some indication that we could be on the verge of an invasion of Lebanon, and then all hell could break loose there again, because it's just the people in charge in Israel. We have crazies clearly, and we have people that are deluded. But I don't think we just have but it's not like the Israeli government, whether the fanatics their fanatics are even scarier than our fanatics, and they're completely in charge. And I think they see that this is their one chance to get what they want. They get that greater Israel, and they're going to go for it. I hope to God that they fail somehow. They're foiled in their attempts, but I think it's clear that they're going for it. They're trying to make it happen. Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben Gvir and these folks. And the thing is, again, like the ones the IDF generals and whatever, okay, maybe they're not as crazy, but hey, they've been carrying out the orders, and let's not pretend they're the good guys. They've been carrying out the orders and actually killing the people, the civilians in Gaza. It's not like they're and they've been assassinating, these people, whatever. They've been doing it. So I don't think there's much of a reason to hope that they'll stay the hand of Netanyahu.
So Netanyahu has ordered the invasion of southern Lebanon.
That's the report that I've seen. And
I did hear something about that as well.
Right.
And I did hear the same thing about I think it was on Judging Freedom. But I also heard the same thing about our Navy out there. It's like, hey, they can only be on alert for so long. They're going to have to go back. We got to,
refuel and whatever,
refuel, do everything, rotate off. And just if you're constantly in this heightened sense of expectation, you're wound taut, the ability to respond starts to crack a bit.
Diminishes over time, right?
Right, diminishes over time, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it was in a Israeli paper. I haven't seen it actually reported in Western media, but I think it came out in an Israeli publication. I can't remember which one, but we'll see.
If you were going to invade southern Lebanon, you shouldn't announce it. I mean, that is what the West does. We announced the counteroffensive for a full year before we did it.
Well, I don't know that it was announced, but it was leaked that he issued that order. I guess there are some people that are worried about it and hoping that maybe it's why it was leaked and want to pressure him not to do it. But
well, another thing that I think it was Ambassador Chase Freeman said is that the Israeli Air Force really relies on clear skies, and they have a limited period of time, which is in the summer or I guess maybe early fall. So it's coming towards the end of the clear sky time.
Right.
When it gets later in the fall and winter, your Air Force won't be able to see as well and be as effective. So if you are going to do their campaign, this seems like the optimal time to do it. We're still waiting for Iran's retaliation. Everybody's wound up tight. Things are blowing up in Israel. There's protests. They're unpopular, but you got those 58 standing ovations in Congress. The U.S. is there. The U.S. Navy is back there.
Yeah. Well, again, he's still, don't forget that, in spite of the protests, Netanyahu has plenty of popular support. I mean, it's you can call him the silent majority, but that's what most Israelis are behind him and what he's doing.
Yeah,
and the ones that it's that group that they dislike him personally, for domestic political reasons, and they want the hostages home, and they know that they need a ceasefire to do that. And I think it was actually read a very interesting discussion of the you could call the split in Israeli society was maybe Ramzi Baroud, somebody like that. But it was basically, I don't want to say echoing because it reaffirmed what I was saying earlier, that there is a split, but it's more of one of style. I mean, it's just like everybody's in favor of basically ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. But on one side, they want to do it slowly, like they've been doing over the last few decades, just incrementally, taking an olive grove and a village at a time, bulldozing a house, every week. That's how it's been going in the West Bank, and then in Israel, just like a slow starvation. And not Israel, rather, I mean Gaza, a slow starvation. So it was going slow, and it was actually working for the Israelis because the rest of the world just forgot about it. He said, okay, we'll just steal their land slowly, right? and we can maintain this, this sophisticated face to the Western world, and our Western friends are happy. Every once in a while, maybe some of them will wring their hands, but that's all that it will be. Nothing changes. It seems like what they're upset about is that, okay, like the mask is off. It's just ugly open talk about ethnic cleansing and genocide, and it's going fast and everybody sees it. That's really,
Hmm.
that's the main, the people that are actually legitimately concerned about the Palestinians and would like for them to have a fair deal are just are not a political force. They exist as individuals, brave individuals, within Jewish Israel, but they don't exist as any kind of political force. It's just they're all in favor of subjugating the Palestinians and taking their land.
How is that possible? It just doesn't seem.
Yeah,
It seems
yeah, it wasn't
against
always
human
true. It's been
nature.
a gradual transformation over time. I mean, the Israel, it was uh, another. Just giving an example, I remember, reading about these extremists within Israeli society. Like there was this Rabbi Meir Kahane, and he was just open about, okay, this is our land, and we need to kill the Palestinians on it and take it, right? Um, well, he ended up like his movement was banned as an extremist movement within Israel. This is like 30 years ago. I think it was one of his people that was assassinated, Yitzhak Rabin. Um, but now, like Ben Gvir is basically was a disciple of his, and is part of his movement. They've moved they were on the extremes, and they just moved into the mainstream. And that's something that's happened gradually over time, and people who are paying attention could see it. It was been happening for decades, but again, because it was gradual, just most of the world didn't really notice it.
I find it hard to believe that there's so few people in that won't speak out and say that, hey, maybe we should have a two-state solution, live in peace with our neighbors, even if it's not out of love for the Palestinians, but just for your own
Right.
self-preservation, saying like, this is looks bad on Israel. We're a very wealthy, prosperous country. We're concerned about our security. Maybe the best way to safeguard our security is to leave the Palestinians alone, to stop these illegal settlements, stop taking over their land, stop mowing the lawn in Gaza, stop bombing Syria and
Hmm.
Lebanon. But why aren't there more people that have that very rational, reasonable thought to preserve their own country? Surely they people in Israel have to be worried.
Yeah.
They've created, like you said, they've sowed hatred throughout the whole region and the whole
Yeah.
Muslim world. And basically, the whole, in many ways, the whole world right now, and it's all directed at Israel.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe you're
Well,
doing something wrong, Israel. Like
yeah.
they don't seem to be able to come to that conclusion. I
Yeah.
don't understand why, or very
Yeah.
few do.
Right. Well, yeah. It's hard to explain. I imagine there's also been a certain amount of self-selection as this trend has gone forward. I think part of it is demographic. You say that the parts of the population that are that are just more open and brutal, in their attitudes towards the Palestinians they've grown faster. They've been more fertile. That's part of it. And then I imagine that as this trend is underway, there's a certain amount of kind of like self-selective emigration on the part of Israelis who just don't like the trend. They say, I don't like the way this country's going. Let's move to France. Let's move to the US. Let's move to Germany.
Right.
I think that's probably also been happening. And then, especially since October 7th, you've had this, you've sown hatred. At this point, you just think, well, geez, it's like, there's no point in talking about peace. They all hate us, you know. So we just have to keep on killing them, because if we stop, they're going to start killing us back. I think that you get into that frame of mind and you start to create, in a way, you make you created that reality, right? You get in a knife fight with somebody and then you attack somebody and start stabbing them. Well, And like halfway through, and he starts to pick up a knife halfway through. You just say, well, maybe I shouldn't have done this. It's just like maybe too late. He's going to start stabbing you. I think
Yeah.
there's,
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think the self-selection is a good point. I mean, when you think about it, Israel is really a fake country in many ways. It's just the people that move to Israel are people that believe in the creating the greater Israel, believe that this is their land, that they're entitled to it. So it self-selects for the people that have that strong belief already. That are like, oh, I'm going here to just claim and take what's mine. They have that kind of conqueror or reclaiming mentality, whatever it is. And then, like you're saying, the people that maybe get there and realize, like, oh, I don't feel so comfortable with this, they just leave because 20% of Israelis have dual citizenship anyway. So
those are the people who tend to have dual citizenship.
right, so they
The
leave,
ones,
and so you get the
right.
ones that come over that want to create and fulfill and believe they're on some kind of holy mission, to reclaim and create greater Israel. And then the ones that think that's a little bit too extreme, they have no problem just leaving. So you just get this condensation of extremism. And like you said, the settlers are incredibly extreme, and that's their purpose. There's 700,000, 800,000 of them now. And like you said, they
In
have
the West Bank, yeah.
in the West Bank, right? Just in the West Bank, and they have very large families, and they raise these kids to say that this is really your purpose. I've seen just footage of some of these schools out there in the West Bank that these kids go to, and where they're just taught that this is your land, and that you need to take it from the Arabs, and that you need to kill them, and it's extreme. It's really
Yeah.
extreme, and it's not even that hidden. People can
No.
find this footage. You just have to
Right.
look for it. You'll never see it on mainstream, of course. But
Right.
it's
They get it,
everywhere.
right. No, it's there. It doesn't take much of an effort. It's just like if you leave your mainstream bubble, you can find all these things very quickly. The mainstream does a good job of suppressing the stuff. Occasionally something gets through, and then that's always treated as some kind of anomaly. And oh, the Israelis are very upset about this, and they'll investigate or whatever. But it's for people who pay attention, they know that this is just the day-to-day reality in places like the West Bank.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dad, we have the Kiev getting long-range missiles soon with the ability to strike deep into Russia. We got Netanyahu announcing that he's going to invade southern Lebanon. We have Iran that's been building up this retaliation for a month and a half now. Who knows when it's going to happen? We're screwed, right? This is blowing up. I'm just seeing all these things, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. It's going to explode, right? World War III is coming. I feel like I mean, I hope cooler heads prevail, but we always say
Yeah.
that, and they never
Yeah.
do. They always,
Right.
always step closer and closer.
Perfectly. I mean, last Friday I was trying to say, hey, looks like cooler heads actually preveled. This
Well, that
may
was
be a
even on
turning point.
Monday, I think, just 2 days ago.
Oh yeah, Monday. Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, and then here we are. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just sort of like we're just steadily, not really, maybe even marching, but kind of shuffling towards the abyss.
Yeah,
just,
just blundering our way right into it. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's really, really real now, and I think if you ask me, will we be in World War III within 6 months? I'm like 50-50 chance now. 50-50. My only hope is that the U.S. and NATO have exhausted their stockpiles so much, and their populations are so against
right.
the idea of
Yeah.
war, that we will
Right.
try to go to war, drum it up, and then we'll do some things, but our
Yeah.
response and our ability to
Yeah.
respond will be so weak. Our ability to mobilize will be so difficult, and
Right.
it just
Yeah.
will peter out. That we'll try
Yeah.
to start the engines, and it'll just grow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, again, like I've said many times, I have more reason to be actually hopeful about what's happening in Europe. It is a very, very dangerous situation, don't get me wrong. But I have more reason to be hopeful there. Yeah, for part of, because the objective circumstances, I think, in the end, again, these people like Tony Blinken, they live in a make-believe world. They're the neocons just don't seem to really have any interest in or any concern about real physical constraints. I guess they have an unlimited faith in the power of the West, and in particular of the U.S. to do whatever it wants. That's part of being a neocon. It's just like, and that came out of the 1990s again. And I don't think they've really woken up to the fact that there are limits, and that the limits are we're actually bumping up against them right now, in terms of weapons and fiscal support too. And at some point, it just, maybe reality will win the day there. um, so, but yeah, like I've said many times, you have these people that are really, it's not an exaggeration. We're not just engaging in any sort of heated rhetoric. And they say that these are genocidal fanatics, that are running Israel. They really are genocidal fanatics. And that's a very scary situation. If it was just Israel, okay, they really can only do so much, but they have the backing of the United States, that we're all well aware of it. So that I find is the really alarming. Again, I may be proven wrong. You never know what's going to happen. But if there's a large regional war that eventually entails the use of nuclear weapons, I would bet that it would happen in the Middle East first.
You think that if there's a large regional war, that it would be contained to,
It
or do you
could
think
be.
that
It could be. Again,
out?
I think I don't think, again, the Russians and even NATO really don't want to wage World War III. I think at least there are enough people on both sides that they'll try to contain it. But the wars aren't always containable. Once a war begins, you just never know where it's going to take you.
So once again, it's just going to be the Muslim world that's just going to suffer really, really unfairly, really
Yeah,
unjustly.
yeah,
It's really, I really feel bad for the Muslims, the
yeah,
Muslim world, just the whole Middle East. This problem wasn't there. They didn't create this problem. They
yeah,
just inherited it, and millions of their people have died. They have been kicked down. They're trying to throw their economies back into the Stone Age. Don't let them develop sanctions, and it just keeps on going and going and
yeah.
going.
You're right. No, it's a
It's
terrible
really,
injustice. I agree.
yeah, and there's this belief, I think, that's ingrained and pushed in a lot of in the United States and Western Europe, that somehow Muslims are the enemy. Muslims are the enemies of Christians. I get that. I get that a lot from people around here. Even, I don't. They just talk to your neighbors, and there's this idea that somehow they're the bad guys, and the
Yeah,
Jews are the God's chosen people. It's such a strange thing coming from Christians, saying
yeah,
that, oh, these people from another religion that believe Jesus is burning in hell and excrement, those are your chosen people as a Christian? Why do you
yeah.
have this? It's such a strange
Right. And
phenomenon, and
then,
it's
okay,
so
right. Well,
powerful.
right. Well, Muslims obviously have been the enemies of Christians, over the course of the last many centuries, ever since the rise of Islam. They conquered many former Christian territories. So, yeah, but in general, like, yeah, even the Muslim religion respects Jesus, as a prophet, and respects Mary. And the Jews, religious Jews do not. Let's just be honest about it. It is based on ignorance. And, in the recent, of course, there are a lot of people who have memories of September 11th, and they know that was carried out by Muslims. But they also didn't
Or
bother, the
was
great
it?
majority. I think it was.
Okay.
But they also don't bother to look at again, the motivations. It's just this very easy, lazy kind of explanation is provided. They hate us for our freedom, or this kind of, they
Mm,
hate us because we're Christians or something. It really just isn't true. They hate us, really, if you look at it, it's because of our unconditional support for Israel, and for the continual violence that Israel has inflicted on its Muslim neighbors. Um, eh, that's the reason. People don't become terrorists because they hate our freedoms. They just don't. I mean, they just find, you look into the individual case histories, it always goes back to these terrible injustices that you were just talking about. Um, and then it's easy to conflate, Muslims. Muslims, we're talking about, billions of people, and there is a very small fraction of them that are jihadists. That it comes out of Sunni, Wahhabist sects that engage in these attacks, often against other Muslims. That's the thing, is like, within Muslim societies, they often regard these people as a serious problem. That's one reason, like, Like you see now, the Muslims in Russia are very closely allied with Putin, and they're some of their most, some of his most avid supporters are Muslims. And if you go back and you try to understand what happened, it was the jihadists, right, that took over places like Chechnya and Dagestan and engaged in all these terrorist attacks. And in the end, the Russians got rid of them. And in fact, the majority of Muslims were happy about that. They were happy to get rid of these people. And and I think you'll find that too throughout much of the Middle East. This is not, these people are not representative. The ones that carry out the horrible terrorist attacks in Europe are not representative of Muslims as a whole. But there's a lot of lazy thinking, and there's no effort to stop and make any distinctions between Shiites and Sunnis, between different kinds of Sunnis, between the jihadists and everyone else. That's what leads to that general sort of feeling or this animus against Muslims in general. Now, people, if you go to Palestine or any of a number of places, you can meet a lot of Muslims, and clearly, many of them are very, warm, friendly people, and there's just no reason for this animus to exist. It comes down to geopolitics and particularly our policies vis-a-vis the Middle East that's empowered certain very small factions within the Muslim world.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just ask you one last question and then we'll wrap it up. What were your thoughts of the debate? Who won? Netanyahu?
Yeah, I watched it for about 20 minutes. I really couldn't bear anymore. I have to, as performance, in a way, that's all it was performance, because there were hardly any arguments laid out on either side, really. Let's be honest. It tended to be just, just a lot of slogans and just incoherence in general. But I say, as a performance, it seemed to me that clearly Kamala Harris won. There was quite a contrast to the last debate. She spent a lot of her time just grinning and smirking, and it's kind of obviously there's something that they had worked on. Hey, work on that smirk. I think she was much better prepared for this performance, than Trump was. But it also has to be said that there was just no doubt in my mind that the moderators were very strongly biased against Trump. And they would call him out for factual mistakes. And yeah, he made a lot of factual. It's just Trump is always all over the map. He exaggerates things. Even when he's broadly correct about something, he doesn't get his facts quite right. And so it's easy to point out his factual mistakes. But Kamala Harris said all kinds of things that just were blatantly false, and there was just never any effort to point that out. It just didn't happen. It was really it really was. I think maybe Trump was foolish to take part in this debate, because it really was clearly kind of designed to boost her chances, while trying to make him look bad.
Right. Yeah, Trump's not a great debater. He's not.
No.
He reminds me of somebody that, you meet at the bar that's already 5 years in and is getting a little cocky and talking about all these things he's doing, and he's getting a little bit louder and talking over you. It's like, he might be fun to hang out with, but it's strange, the whole MAGA movement for me, that Trump is so popular because whenever I watch him speak, I'm not impressed. I'm never impressed by his performances. I mean, sure, against Biden, but Biden was 10% there, so that, I feel like that doesn't count.
I think
you
could
had
say
somebody like RFK or,
he's somebody who actually makes arguments. That's really old fashioned now. I mean, obviously he's some kind of weirdo because he makes arguments,
I guess just the appeal of the MAGA movement for so many people is just that Trump is genuine. I guess people can relate to it. Is that he is off the cuff. He's just
right. Also, he does give a big middle finger to the establishment, like again and again. So, and I think a lot of people just like that. I mean, sometimes I like that. I wish I had somebody much more sophisticated doing that, could really pick things apart. But, that's just not going to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I mean, just when I was watching it, just in my mind, it was just like, this is pathetic that these are our two candidates.
Yeah.
That's what came across my like. I was thinking, I coached high school debates that were much better than this.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's the thing. It's like they very rarely even answer the questions.
Yeah, they don't even answer it. Right.
Yeah. Or, they just, often they completely ignored it, or they just, answered part of the question, then just would go way off into left field.
It's mostly
on something.
ad hominem attacks.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's, well, that's American democracy. Get Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And no matter who, the one clear winner of whoever wins this election will be Netanyahu, it seems like. He will.
Unfortunately, right.
So, no matter, Israel won the debate at the end of the day.
I think somewhere in the, to tie this back to, they both swore their undying loyalty to Israel, of course. And then, but somewhere in the debate, I believe Trump said that Putin has killed millions of Ukrainians. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's, I don't know. That's kind of typical. I mean, he just...
Yeah, big numbers sound impressive. And well, he's acting like, I think, he's a real estate guy. I think you're always exaggerating, always inflating whenever you're trying to sell a property or a house.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just he can't help himself.
Right.
But okay, well, I think we can end it there. Have a good rest of your day, and then let's see, maybe we can have some good news on Friday. But based on this conversation we had today, I think I'm going to go to Costco and buy prepper material for the big war that's coming.
Okay, I'm going to start digging a hole in my backyard.
What's that going to be for? Bomb shelter?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. All right, Dad. Have a good one.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.